Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel, that is the R in the art key Stumblingbear, and I'm a reader and a writer. And I'm back to do my April wrap-up. Now, if you've been watching my Magical Readathon vlogs, you'll have gotten glimpses of everything I've read while hearing about my Magical Readathon books specifically. But if you haven't, I'm still going to talk about everything now. The first thing I finished in the month of March was Whiskey and Warfare by E.M. Hamill, and this is one of my self-published science fiction contest books. One of the semi-finalists my group was given, and this is a space opera. It starts off with Marin, I think is her name. Her partner, lifelong partner, mate, has just died and she's grieving. And her best friends, who used to be in a mercenary company with her, have come to the funeral and they're supporting her. Her partner's family want her to return their ashes to them. They have a special ceremony on their planet. And right now there's a civil war on a planet brewing that would be on the space lanes that she would take. So two of her friends still own the mercenary ship that they bought afterwards called the Golden Girl, and they offer to take her to her in-laws. And while on the way, she gets to see that the Civil War isn't necessarily a civil war. It really is a space opera adventure romp. And it has a fun AI called Girl, who's the AI of the ship, as well as very sweet friendships. Something else I liked is this cast of characters are all older, like 50s, 60s age, and they talk about what it's like to get older. I'm not there yet, but it was just refreshing to have that mindset, to get to see that mindset and how, hey, you can still do things, and how does getting older affect what you can do. And then also how when you're older, how you're going to handle grief and anger and surprise very differently than when you were younger. Absolutely love this book. I then finished Countess by Suzanne Palumbo, and this is a retelling of the Count of Monte Cristo in space, in novella form. And in this one, the Countess is, her background is she's an ex-Terran Antillean, so someone from the Antillean Islands here on Earth, or her ancestry at least. And it continues following themes of colonization as you go into space. Obviously, the Countess is betrayed, sent to prison. Someone helps her escape, and then she joins the rebel faction to better the lives of the ex-Terran Antillians. Something that everyone is saying is the descriptions of food in this are on point. It will make you hungry, even if you never had the foods that they are talking about. I will say just my personality is, I don't get Alba's, to me what she does in the book doesn't make sense at all. But otherwise, you know, pretty solid. I've read short stories by Palumbo before, and so I know that I like her style. I'll pick up whatever else she writes. I then listened to The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This was one of my Magical Readathon prompts, and this is all about sharing abundance and changing the economy. And instead of having scarcity and people fighting and paying high prices for things, let's have abundance and share freely. There's no reason to, you know, jack up prices on people, especially as right now we're living in a time of inflation. We're not living in a great economy here. This is not a political channel, and even though yes, books can be political, and this one probably is, but you know, specifically talking about economies, I'm not going to get into further politics myself. I next finished Malga's to War by Edward Ashton, and this was another of my Magical Readathon prompts. This is about a snarky AI named Mal, short for malware, who is just jumping from like system to system, while there is a war going on between those who are augmented, or the Federals, and those who are not and don't think people should have augmentations, called the Humanists. And he is cut off from infospace, which is the internet, and gets trapped in a body of a woman who had just died. However, her system is still working, so he can still move her body, and finds out that she was a caretaker guardian of a little girl who looks like a toddler but is really 18. And he agrees with Kaylee, the girl, that yeah, he should help her out to a safe area. So they start their adventure, pick up some more people on the way, and end up, getting stopped and pulled to the headquarters of the Humanists, where he finds out that the Humanists are actually being controlled by an AI. So thus it's AI versus AI. Decent sci-fi romp. I don't think it's doing anything new. Definitely issues with consent with different things. Not sexual. I then finished The Way Up Is Death by Dan Hanks. This is one of the books this is a 2025 new release that I was interested in reading. And the whole premise is 13 people are plucked from their lives and around the Great Britain area, and they're told to ascend this tower, and the tower requires a sacrifice after each level. So you don't know who is going to get out or what type of levels you're going to find. I then read Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. This is another of my 2025 new releases that I was interested in. And this is another short fun novella that is a murder mystery in space. You are set on a generation ship that is in progress, and one of the ship's detectives is Dorothy, and she's been resting. In this world, you can, once your body gets old, your mind can go into basically like a storage device, and she wakes up to find that she's in somebody else's body and doesn't know what's going on, and now has to solve a murder mystery. And I like it. I'm hoping that there's going to be more in this series, because it does kind of feel like we're going to get more. I finished The Tusks of Extinction by Ray Naylor. This is a novella talking about what it would be like if mammoths came back, and we're following 3 different perspectives, which I thought was too much for this book. But the main perspective was Demira, who had been an elephant activist when she was alive. This is in the future, where consciousness, your minds can be saved, and so her mind was brought back and, with her permission, put into a mammoth to help teach the mammoths how to be mammoths. So she's in a female mammoth, she's a matriarch. And on their preserve, poachers and the people who set up the preserve are now considering hunting mammoths, and she's not okay with that. That's basically the premise of this. I then read the novella The Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain by Sophia Samatar. And in another review that I saw, I heard this called a sci-fi mythology, and I think that's just a perfect way to describe it. It is sci-fi, it is set in space. If you've ever read The Unkindness of Ghosts, it's like on a ship, kind of similar to that, where you have different castes. Well, in this one you have 3 castes. You have those who are chained down below in the hold, where hardly anyone ever sees them unless you're a guard. Then you have the guard and like a working class, and they're all called the ankleted because they have a device on their ankle. And then you have those without. I think one of the main characters calls them the weightless. They are the elite who get to control everyone else's fates. And in this book, the boy, who is one of the chained, and he's been brought up a certain way, has a mythology, has a prophet that he follows, and he gets plucked out because they've discovered his drawings that he's been making on the wall. And the woman is one of the ankleted. Her father had been in the hold before and brought out because of a scholarship, so she fought to bring back that program, which is why the boy is coming out. The boy does not know what is going on. And I don't think anyone ever explained it. They're just like, hey, you're here. Guess what? You get this chance. And he's just like, wait, what? And they're like, now assimilate, and not understanding that his life has been completely different than what everyone else's life has been, because he's been treated as property. And the woman, and this is the designations that they use. They're called the boy and the woman. They are not given names. They have names, but they're not referred by name. And then the woman is a professor and trying to help the boy, and then through the boy realizes, basically the class inequality that's going on and how she had been trying to fight against the system from the inside, but it wasn't working. And then there are characters who have names, and they are all of the weightless, the ones who can basically control those with the anklets. And I'm not going to go too much farther into the plot of this one. And it's a very interesting mix of what is religion going to look like in the future and society. I then read The Black Company by Glenn Cook. This was my third Magical Readathon book, and this is a grimdark. All the trigger warnings, go look them up ahead of time before you try to read this book if you haven't before. And this is kind of written in, I would say, more like a journal style, because you get vignettes. You are following Croker, who is the company's medic and keeps the historian, basically. And so the first chapter starts off with how they met this person called Soulcatcher and ended up in the service of Soulcatcher and the lady. And then every chapter after that is like something about serving under the lady, who the lady is actually a tyrant, because they call the other group the rebels. Magically brought back out from the dead or sleeping stasis, have no clue. It doesn't go into a lot of the fantasy plot elements that you would typically see like an epic fantasy. It is really focused on Croker and the company and what they're doing. So they're being sent here to fight something, they're being sent here to fight something, they're sent here to this town to do like an espionage mission. And if Croker's there, you're getting details of what's happening. And it's just basically life as a mercenary. There are amusing things and there are grotesque things. I did find it interesting. I know like years ago I tried to read this book and I bounced off, but I probably will continue this series in the future. And then the last thing I finished in the month of March was Aliens Bishop by T.R. Napper. This was my last Magical Readathon, and this is following the AI Lance Bishop after Aliens, the movie Aliens 3. His body's been rescued, he's been rebooted, and his creator, Michael Bishop, wants the information about the xenomorphs in his head. But guess what? There's some Marines that found out he's alive, sort of, and they want that information too. And then there's another group of Vietnamese smugglers who are just pulled into the plot and made to suffer. It is actually a really fun ride, and you get 3 perspectives during this book. If you like horror space opera, you can't go wrong with this. So that was the last thing I finished. To do, some Readathon check-ins, Whiskey and Warfare checks off my change of life prompt on my WIC Readathon board. So I've gotten another one off. And most recently, I've started doing the R Fantasy Bingo and gotten 4 done. Alien Bishops, less than 1,000 ratings. Murder by Memory, published in 2025. Mal Goes to War fits the parent prompt, and The Black Company fits the prompt for a past our Reddit fantasy bingo. Our fantasy bingo. Nope. Our fantasy book club. So that's how I'm doing on those readathons. And then what am I still currently reading? I am still currently reading A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. I am almost done, I'm just chapters away, so I will have this finished at the beginning of May. And I am still reading The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Mohammed. So, expect those will probably be like my first ones done, and I have barely started The Wakers of the Cryocrypt by Nathan Kuzak, which is another self-published science fiction contest book. How did your April reading go? Do you have any standouts, any books that you want to tell me about? I'd love to know down below. Thank you, and have a great day.